بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قد كانت لكم أسوة حسنة في إبراهيم والذين معه إذ قالوا لقومهم إنا براء منكم ومما تعبدون من دون الله كفرنا بكم وبدا بيننا وبينكم العداوة والبغضاء أبدا حتى تؤمنوا بالله وحده إلا قول إبراهيم لأبيه لأستغفرن لك وما أملك لك من الله من شيء ربنا عليك توكلنا وإليك أنبنا وإليك المصير ربنا لا تجعلنا فتنة للذين كفروا واغفر لنا ربنا إنك أنت العزيز الحكيم لقد كان لكم فيهم أسوة حسنة لمن كان يرجو الله واليوم الآخر ومن يتول فإن الله هو الغني الحميد صدق الله العظيم. The amazing thing about the life of Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salam is that usually every time Dhul Hijjah comes around, we hear a story from his life. We hear about how he had wanted a child for a very long time, and he had reached his 80s and he still had not had a child. He made dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, asking for a child, and Allah granted him Sayyidina Ismail alayhi salam. And then he left him and his mother Hajar in the desert, in the area of Mecca. And then he would come and he would visit them, and the two later would build the Kaaba together. And then the story about sacrificing him after having seen in a dream when he was a child, just 7 years old at the time, and he had conceded to whatever Allah had commanded him. But if we look deeper at the life of Sayyidina Ibrahim, then we actually see more than that. We see, no doubt, that he was a slave of Allah. He was someone who was ready and willing to do whatever Allah had commanded him. But if we look at his history, then we see that he had taken a path. In fact, it would be more correct to say that Allah had walked him along a path that brought him closer and closer to him. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says about him that indeed there is a beautiful example for you in Sayyidina Ibrahim and those who are with him, meaning those who followed him. And Sayyidina Ibrahim is a great example for the believers. Remember when he said to his people, indeed I am free from you and that which you worship besides Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that I deny that. And there is a dislike and an enmity between us and you, and it will always be there حَتَّى تُؤْمِنُوا بِاللَّهِ وَحْدَهُ. It will always be there until you believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone. Sayyidina Ibrahim, like every Nabi, was born a Nabi, which means that they weren't necessarily born with nubuwwah, meaning their nubuwwah didn't start, but Allah had, from their very birth, protected them from worshipping anything other than Allah, protected them from sinning against Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so here, for all of the believers, those who were born into Islam and those who came to it afterwards, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, examine the life of Sayyidina Ibrahim. Because if you examine it, you will find that he was uswa hasana, he was a beautiful example. And he gives the example that he came to his own people and he saw them worshipping other than Allah, saw them doing shirk. And he said that there is an enmity, that you and I, we cannot be like brothers in Islam. That we who come together today, we have a bond between each other that goes beyond blood. It goes beyond friendship. This bond is that we are brothers in Islam. And so those who are not our brothers, it doesn't mean that we treat them badly. In fact, it doesn't even mean that we look down upon them. Maulana Ashraf Ali Thanwi and other of our scholars, they said that whenever they look at another person, they always consider themselves to be the worst of the two. If they look at a believer, they say, MashaAllah, this is a slave of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And he must be closer to Allah than me. Why? Because when I see him, I see his connection with Rabbul Alameen, I see his iman. But when I look at myself, I see all of the sins that I've done. It's very possible that because of his iman, Allah has forgiven him. Even though outwardly he may not look as I do, but he may already be a beloved of Allah. Whereas me, I know that 5 minutes ago I did a sin. I know that in the morning I did a sin. I know that my prayer was not as good as it should have been. And for me, if I were to start making a list of my sins and my faults, that would go on and on and on. So for sure, this other Muslim brother, he is better than me. And if I look at a non-Muslim, when I see a non-Muslim, then I see somebody who still lives and breathes, and there is hope that this person takes shahada before he dies. And if he takes shahada, then he is a person whose all of his past has been completely wiped away, and he is better than me. So until he breathes his last, and until I breathe my last, from my perspective, every single person is better than me. So when we see people who are on kufr and shirk, on one hand, we know that there is a possibility that they may die in a state that's better than us. But at the same time, while they are in a state of kufr, while they are in a state of shirk, there is a certain distance between us and them. Again, it doesn't mean we treat them badly. It doesn't mean that we wish bad for them. In fact, we want hidayah for them. But what it means is that it is not the relationship that I have with a brother of mine. And so Sayyidina Ibrahim says that there is adawa and baghd. There is a dislike between us. حَتَّى تُؤْمِنُوا بِاللَّهِ وَحْدَهُ. Until you believe in Allah alone. And when you believe in Allah alone, then we are brothers. And there's no division between us. Accept the statement of Sayyidina Ibrahim when he said to his father, indeed, I will seek Allah's forgiveness for you. And there is nothing in my hands. Meaning Allah is the owner of everything. Oh my Rabb, now he makes dua that my trust is in you, and I turn in pardon, meaning in tawbah to you, and to you is the return. What we're learning here in the words of Sayyidina Ibrahim is what the mentality is supposed to be for a believer. That when we start walking in this path of Sayyidina Ibrahim, we have the mentality of one, how we look at other people around us. Everyone is better than us, and the one who is a brother of mine, he is closest to me. Number two, that for those who are sinning against Allah, we seek Allah's forgiveness for that person. We don't hate that person, we want good for that person. And we turn towards Allah saying, oh Allah, my trust is entirely with you. I turn to you in forgiveness, and I know that my end is going to be with you. Every person, when they set out for a journey, do they just leave the house aimless, not knowing where they're going? We saw all of these people recently, they left for Hajj. Did they just get up one morning, throw on their slippers and walk out the door? No, they made plans. They prepared for weeks, months in advance. They were online, nusuk, sitting at their computers, trying to save their money, going around asking people to forgive them. What dua would you like me to make? Getting books and learning how Hajj is supposed to be made, doing a lot of istighfar with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They were making preparations. packing their bags. In fact, the day that my father left, I went to meet him. And he was going with 2 other people, and as soon as I walked inside the house, there's bags set up. They're in the most comfortable clothing that they can be in, ready for this journey. Sayyidina Ibrahim likewise, he says, وَإِلَيْكَ الْمَصِيرُ, that in this journey that I'm taking, Ya Allah, you are the end of this journey. You are the end. So from the very beginning, my sights are on you. My trust is in you. I am seeking my forgiveness from you. And this is our example as well. That when we get up every morning, our sights should be with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What is the path that we want? Are we just going to keep walking around aimlessly in our life? It's fine if you don't know what your major is going to be. It's fine if you don't know what job you're going to end up in. Eventually you'll find it. What's not okay is that you wake up and you don't know what kind of Muslim you're going to be. That you wake up and you don't have this idea that my end is going to be with Allah. How can I reach that end? Because the end has a time limit. And we don't know when that is. It could be at the end of the day that your day is over, meaning your life is over. Did you reach that goal? Did you reach Allah? It could be that it's 10 years, 20, 100 years from now. But without knowing and without making preparation, then we're like that person who just walks out in the morning in his slippers and underwear, not knowing where he's going. So what is the path that Sayyidina Ibrahim took? He said, رَبَّنَا لَا تَجْعَلْنَا فِتْنَةً لِلَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا وَاغْفِرْ لَنَا رَبَّنَا. Continues in his dua. Oh our Rabb, don't make us a test for those who are disbelievers. Meaning, the disbelievers are testing them. They're harming them. They're giving a difficult time. We see this throughout the Muslim world right now. That the kuffar are giving a very difficult time to our believers, to our believing brothers and sisters. وَاغْفِرْ لَنَا رَبَّنَا. And he ties these together. Pay attention to the dua. He starts off by saying, رَبَّنَا عَلَيْكَ تَوَكَّلْنَا وَإِلَيْكَ أَنَبْنَا. That, oh Allah, our trust is in you. I seek your forgiveness. Don't make us a trial at the hands of the disbelievers. And then finishing, وَاغْفِرْ لَنَا رَبَّنَا. Forgive us. Meaning in tawbah, in turning towards Allah, and in the forgiveness of Allah is how we, or seeking the forgiveness of Allah, is how we will protect ourselves from being a test or being tested in this dunya. إِنَّكَ أَنْتَ الْعَزِيزُ الْحَكِيمُ. And then he goes, and then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala goes on to say that in these people, Sayyidina Ibrahim, his children, his progeny, all the way down to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and the ummahs of all of these people and those that followed them, uswatun hasana. There is a beautiful example, liman kana yarujullah, for those who seek Allah and they anticipate the last day. You know, I didn't want to make this into a lecture where I just talk to you the entire time. I think you guys have been enough of my lectures, looking at your faces. And I'm not quite sure how I'm going to open this up to you either. This idea that Sayyidina Ibrahim didn't just wake up one day knowing what he was going to do, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guided him. And if we look at his path when he first started, what did he do? What is the path that he took? And where did he go from there? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says, Inna Ibrahim kana ummatan qanitan lillahi hanifa. Sayyidina Ibrahim was an ummah on his own. We, as I mentioned, we have one another's company. There was a time when Sayyidina Ibrahim, his nephew Lut, and his wife Sarah were the only believers on the planet. That was it. So in that way, Sayyidina Ibrahim was an ummah on his own, meaning he was the one who did all of the good works. He is the one who did tabligh, da'wah. He is the one who was the messenger. He is the one who was the da'i. He was everything. And so such is a personality that doesn't need the support of other human beings. قَانِتًا لِلَّهِ. He was obedient to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Elsewhere, Allah says He was Halim, meaning He was forbearing. And this is the example for us as well, that as Muslims, we need to be forbearing. What does forbearing mean? It means you have mercy even when people are treating you badly. You have mercy to people even when there's no other reason to have mercy for that person, meaning no selfish reason to have mercy for that person. وَلَمْ يَكُنْ مِنَ الْمُشْرِكِينَ, and he wasn't one of the disbelievers. There's a very interesting idea. Some of us may be thinking, back in the day there used to be idol worshippers. There used to be people who would worship stone idols. Maybe there are some right now, like in India and in places like that. But who's doing it here? Right? And how many idol worshippers do we have right now? Is shirk really taking place? Because nowadays, most of the people that we know, it's not that they're worshiping an idol, it's that they're worshiping nothing. There is nothing that they're holding up and bowing their head to. Some of the ulama mentioned a very important point. What they said is before, people used to worship other than Allah. Allah is the one who is Khaliq, Raziq. Allah is the one who created. Allah is Razzaq. He is the one who gives food. He is the one who brings something from nothing. Everything comes from Allah. Allah has all power. He has all knowledge. What did these idol worshippers do? They said, okay, this idol is the one who created the universe. So one aspect of Allah they gave to this idol. This idol, this is the one who gives us money and wealth. This idol, this is the one who controls the seas. This one controls the air. So they took the attributes of Allah and they gave it separately to different things, and they used to worship each and every one separately. That if I'm going on a trip and I need good weather on the seas, let me worship this idol. If I need good weather tomorrow, let me worship this idol. And so they would take the attributes of Allah and they would give it to different idols, and then they would worship those idols instead. What do people do today? What people do today is they say, oh, the universe, it was always there. So the aspect of creation, we'll give it to the universe. Oh, the seas, that's controlled by these physical forces. That's controlled by the tides and by the currents. So we'll attribute that aspect to the ocean itself. Where does food come from? Oh, it depends on how many nutrients are in the ground, how much rain falls. Okay, we'll assign this attribute to this object. And in doing that, they have done the same thing. They have taken these aspects of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and they've distributed to all these other things. I need to make money. Oh, Allah is not the one who feeds me. It's me who feeds me. I am going to go and work hard. I am going to go and get a job, and then I will get the money. And so now I've given it to myself. Ilm, I'm the most knowledgeable of people. I give ilm to myself as well. And in doing qudra, power, oh, we give it to the government. The government can do what it wants. It has the military, it has the police. And so in doing that, what they've done is rather than assigning the attributes of Allah to idols, they've assigned it to people, to objects, and in that way they're still doing shirk. Hasn't changed. وَلَمْ يَكُمْ مِنَ الْمُشْرِكِينَ. Sayyidina Ibrahim was not one of these people. Meaning all of these attributes, all power, all knowledge, all capability, we attribute it to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone. شَاكِرًا لِأَنْعُمِهِ. He was grateful for all of the blessings that he received. اجْتَبَاهُ وَهَدَاهُ إِلَى صِرَاطٍ مُسْتَقِيمٍ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chose him and guided him towards the straight path. So we see that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had put certain traits in Sayyidina Ibrahim which allowed Sayyidina Ibrahim to start taking this right path. And then in another place in Surah Al-Jathiyah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, أَفَرَأَيْتَ مَنِ اتَّخَذَ إِلَهَهُ هَوَاهُ. Coming back to what we were saying, that have you seen the one who takes his own self, his own desires as his God? وَأَضَلَّهُ اللَّهُ عَلَىٰ عِلْمٍ وَخَتَمَ عَلَىٰ سَمْعِهِ. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one who misguided him from knowledge. and placed a seal, وَخَتَمَ عَلَى سَمْعِهِ وَقَلْبِهِ وَجَعَلَ عَلَى بَصَرِهِ غِشَاوَةً. There are, and I know some of you have heard me speak about epistemology before. Everything that you know comes from three sources. Everything you know comes from three sources. Either it's from the five senses, you see it, you feel it, you touch it, you hear it, or it's from someone, it's from your own intellect, that you understand it, 1 + 1 = 2. It's not something you saw, it's not something you heard, it's not something you felt, it's something that you thought of. 1 and 1 = 2. And then the third is something that you've been told by someone. These are the three. There's no other way of knowing something. One of these three. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala explains that those people who leave the worship of Allah, who take the attributes of Allah and they give it to something else, whether it be themselves or other creation. وَخَتَمَ عَلَى سَمْعِهِ وَقَلْبِهِ. Allah puts a seal on their ability to hear things, meaning on their ability to gain knowledge from other people, whether it be through wahi or the statement of scholars, and upon their intellect as well. So they no longer have the proper understanding. You try to explain to them something, and it just doesn't get through. وَجَعَلَ عَلَى بَصَرِهِ غِشَاوَةً. And then there is a blanket or there's a covering over their eyes, meaning their five senses. So these are a people, they no longer understand, they no longer see, they no longer hear. Why? Because they turned away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. فَمَنْ يَهْدِيهِ مِنْ بَعْدِ اللَّهِ. So who is going to guide him after he has left Allah, meaning other than Allah? أَفَلَا تَذَكَّرُونَ. Don't they think? Don't they contemplate? وَقَالُوا مَا هِيَ إِلَّا حَيَاتُنَا الدُّنْيَا. And what do they say? They say that there's only this life. There's nothing that's going to come afterwards. You know, what is it? YOLO, right? I think this is old now, but you only live once. This is what they say. مَا هِيَ إِلَّا حَيَاتُنَا الدُّنْيَا. There's no other life except for our life right now. نَمُوتُ وَنَحْيَا. That we live, that we die, and we live. This is our life. وَمَا يُحْلِكُنَا إِلَّا الدَّهْرِ. And the only thing that will end us is time itself. Meaning you live out your life and that's it. وَمَا لَهُمْ بِذَلِكَ مِنْ عِلْمٍ. They don't have any knowledge about that. إِنْهُمْ إِلَّا يَظُنُّونَ. This is just their conjecturing. This is just their ideas. This is the time we live in, that there's no real knowledge anymore. People just come up with any idea and that's their belief. And now you have to respect it. Right? Today a man thinks he's a woman, tomorrow he thinks he's a cat, and you just have to respect it. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says they have no knowledge. إِنْهُمْ إِلَّا يَظُنُّونَ. This is just their thoughts. وَإِذَا تُتْلَى عَلَيْهِمْ آيَاتُنَا بَيِّنَاتٍ مَا كَانَ حُجَّتُهُمْ إِلَّا أَنْ قَالُوا أُؤْتُوا بِآبَائِنَا إِن كُنْتُمْ صَادِقِينَ. So when the ayat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are recited on them, clear ayat, that they have no other proof except that they say, follow our forefathers if you are truthful. Meaning we went to school, we listened to our parents, we listen to what we find on television, we see the people around us believing something, so we believed it as well. And that's it. I don't need to prove it to you. I don't even need to understand it myself. And I went to school, my teacher, she said X, Y, and Z. It must be the truth, and that's why I follow it. قُلِ اللَّهُ يُحْيِيكُمْ ثُمَّ يُمِيتُكُمْ ثُمَّ يَجْمَعَكُمْ إِلَى يَوْمِ الْقِيَامَةِ. So, Ya Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam, say, Allah is the one who gives you life. Then He will give you death. And then He will gather you on the day of judgment, لَا رَيْبَ فِيهِ, in which there is no doubt. وَلَكِنَّ أَكْثَرَ النَّاسِ لَا يَعْلَمُونَ. But most people, they don't know. So Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salam was walking this path where he realized that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the source of everything, and he turned away from associating partners to anyone else. And so in the life of Sayyidina Ibrahim, we see two proofs. Maybe we can say two two ways of proving. What's the first one? He said, الَّذِي خَلَقَنِي فَهُوَ يَهْدِينِ وَالَّذِي هُوَ يُطْعِمُنِي وَيَسْقِينِ وَإِذَا مَرِضْتُ فَهُوَ يَشْفِينِ. He said, one way of knowing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala exists, that Allah is always with you, is that you look at yourself. You look at yourself. You don't have to look out, look in. And when you look in, Sayyidina Ibrahim says that I realized, هُوَ الَّذِي خَلَقَنِي. I didn't create myself. I didn't create my parents. They didn't just come from nothing. There is someone who created me. And He is the one who guided me. And He is the one who gave me food and He gave me drink. And whenever I get sick, I have no control over it. Right? Sometimes we have a plan. Tomorrow I'm going to go do X, Y, and Z. You wake up in the morning and you have a fever. Oh, there goes your plans. You had no control over it. Tomorrow someone was playing, he was with you, and then next day you know he's in the hospital. There was a person who was alive, you saw him in the masjid every day, next day you're doing his janazah. Did he plan for that? No. It is something that just happened. In the same way, when we become sick 2-3 days later, most of the time we get better. Did we make ourselves get better? Did we control that immune system? Did we make all of those factors happen? No. So Sayyidina Ibrahim, he realized that whenever I become sick, He is the one who makes me better. So when a person looks inside, then they'll begin to realize that there are aspects of us that we have no control over. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one that controls those aspects. Now there's another way of doing it that Sayyidina Ibrahim tells us, or Allah tells us about Sayyidina Ibrahim, is that if you don't look in, at least look out. وَإِذْ قَالَ إِبْرَاهِيمُ لِأَبِيهِ آزَرَ أَتَتَّخِذُ أَصْنَامًا آلِهَةً. Sayyidina Ibrahim said to his father Azar, that do you take these idols as your God? And we know the story. What kind of occupation does Sayyidina Ibrahim's father have?
He would construct idols.
He would make idols. Imagine, in your home, as Sayyidina Ibrahim, you're a child. You grew up. You go into your backyard and you see your father, he's making these idols. And then once he takes the dirt, he takes the rocks, he mixes them, he puts them together. Sometimes it doesn't work out, so he breaks it up and he starts all over again. He's the one who paints it, he's the one who does everything. And then people come and they worship it. You would see how foolish that is. That I saw this in the morning, it was dirt, and then I saw my father working, and in the evening it was built. It's mentioned in history that Sayyidina Ibrahim's father, Azar, would make Sayyidina Ibrahim go into the marketplace and sell these idols. So he already saw, my father is the one who made this morning, now I'm the one who's selling it. He said that he would go into the marketplace and he would tell people, come, come, who wants to buy these deaf, dumb, and blind gods? Who wants to come and buy this God that my father made today? And obviously, how many idols do you think he sold that way? None. So then he did it on purpose. Then he would come back to his father and say, yes, I was in the marketplace all day, but nobody wanted to buy it. In this way, he obeyed his father, but at the same time, he didn't sell any of these idols as well. So Sayyidina Ibrahim, he said to his father that these very idols that you're the one who made it, you're going to worship it. إِنِّي أَرَاكَ وَقَوْمَكَ فِي ضَلَالٍ مُبِينٍ. That indeed I see you and your people in a clear error. Clear error. وَكَذَلِكَ. In fact, recently I was talking to somebody who was Hindu, and I was asking them, what is your belief? And I'm like, do you worship idols? They're like, yes, we worship idols. And I'm like, these are the ones that sit in your mandir. You go and you put food in front of it? Yes, we put food in front of it. Who made these? Oh, we have some gurus, they make these and they put it together. And I'm like, well, they become dusty, don't they? Like, yeah, who cleans them? Oh, we have others of our saints that they live in the temple and they clean it off every day. I'm like, do you put food in front of it? Yes, we put food in front of it. It's a great honor. Does the food go bad? No. Somebody comes and they remove it. So who's taking care of these idols? He's like, oh, we have these saints. They're very pure people. They're very good people, and they take care of it. And as I'm having this conversation, I'm waiting for this person, for that light bulb to go off. That here you are, telling me all of these things that you do for this idol. And then you want it to do something for you? It can't eat, it can't clean itself, it can't make itself, it can't do anything. And then you go and you put your head down in front of it? I'm waiting for that light bulb to go off. And Sayyidina Ibrahim, same, he saw his people doing it. He said that you, fi dalalin mubin, that you're in a clear error. How do you not see this? وَكَذَلِكَ نُرِي إِبْرَاهِيمَ مَلَكُوتَ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, in the same way that we showed him the falsehood of these idols. And again, don't get me wrong. Don't think today that we don't have idols. We have a lot of idols. Those people who are atheist or agnostic, they have many idols, maybe more than the Hindus do. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, in the same way we show Sayyidina Ibrahim the kingdom of the heavens and the earth, وَلِيَكُونَ مِنَ الْمُوقِنِينَ, so that he could be of those people who had yaqeen, who had certainty. That he would look up at the heavens and the earth and he would see its grandeur and its splendor, and say that there must be a Rabb for all of these things. فَلَمَّا جَنَّ عَلَيْهِ اللَّيْلُ رَأَى كَوْكَبًا. So then the night came. And Sayyidina Ibrahim, he saw the stars. قَالَ هَذَا رَبِّي. He said, this is my Rabb. This Sayyidina Ibrahim, was he a worshipper of stars at this point? Right? Remember I told you, the Anbiya never worshipped anything other than Allah. From birth, Allah protected them. So it's impossible that Sayyidina Ibrahim would look at the stars and say, هَذَا رَبِّي. What was he doing? He was in front of his people. In the same way that he told his father and he told his people that you are in a clear error. One day, he is out with his people. The night comes. The stars, they start sparkling in the night. And he says, he looks up in front of everybody at the stars. He says, هَذَا رَبِّي. Look, everyone, look. This is my Rabb. Look how bright and shiny they are. فَلَمَّا أَفَلَ قَالَ لَإِن لَمْ فَلَمَّا أَفَلَ قَالَ لَا أُحِبُّ الْآفِلِينَ. And then when the morning came, those stars set. And he said that I don't like those things that set. Why? Because my Rabb, Allah, the one who is holding everything together, he's not something that can just disappear. He's not something that he wasn't there yesterday and now he's here now and then he's gone by the morning. How can this creator create everything? How can this sustain everything? If when the sun starts to rise, we can't see it anymore. Meaning, the sun is blocking it. Next night comes. فَلَمَّا رَأَى الْقَمَرَ بَازِغًا قَالَ هَذَا رَبِّي. Then the next night came. Now the moon rises. Now, nobody even looks for the moon. Right? They look at their calendars, they calculate it, no one's even looking at the moon anymore. Back then, people used to look at the moon. رَأَى الْقَمَرَ بَازِغًا. So the moon came up. He said, look everyone, هَذَا رَبِّي. This is my Rabb. فَلَمَّا أَفَلَ قَالَ لَإِن لَمْ يَهْدِنِي رَبِّي لَأَكُونَنَّ مِنَ الْقَوْمِ الضَّالِّينَ. So then the moon, it set. And he said that if my Rabb doesn't guide me, then I will be among those people that are lost. Again, remember, it's not that Sayyidina Ibrahim is lost. He's saying this in front of his people. If he was lost, why would he say? He's looking for his Rabb. And then he says that if my Rabb doesn't guide me, then I will be among those that are lost, meaning I will be like all of you. فَلَمَّا رَأَى الشَّمْسَ بَازِغًا. And then when he saw the sun rising, قَالَ هَذَا رَبِّي هَذَا أَكْبَرُ. He said, this is my Rabb. It must be my Rabb. This must be your Rabb. It is the biggest of all of them. Right? We know that there are people used to have many idols. And in that, there was the largest of the idols. And the Hindus, the idol worshippers of the past, all did this. They used to have many, many idols, but there always was the one who was the biggest. The biggest was the one who created all the rest of them. The biggest was the one who created the universe. It says, هذا أكبر فلما أفلت قال يا قوم إني بريء مما تشركون. And so when that sun set, he said to his people that I am free, meaning I have nothing to do with these things that you associate with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Let's backtrack in case we forgot. I'm not telling you a story. I'm showing you a path. The path that Sayyidina Ibrahim took. He was already a Nabi. He tried talking to his father, he tried talking to his people, but they weren't listening. So he said, let me give them a practical example. So he gave him a practical example that the way you look for your Rabb is you look at something and you say, oh, this is my idol. But then you say, wait, it rises and it sets. It comes and it goes. How can it be my Rabb? He's given them an example that you have these idols that you worship. Right now, before it wasn't there, then it got made, and then tomorrow it's crumbling and you're replacing it with another one. How can this be your Rabb? إني وجهت وجهي للذي فطر السماوات والأرض حنيفا. That indeed I turn my face, meaning my attention, towards the creator of the heavens and the earth completely. Meaning my attention is only towards him. وَمَا أَنَا مِنَ الْمُشْرِكِينَ. I'm not among those people that associate with Allah. وَحَاجَهُ قَوْمُهُ. The people didn't stop. Remember what Allah said, that these people, their eyes and their ears and their intellect, it's all blocked. Because of their shirk, it's all blocked. فَحَاجَهُ قَوْمُهُ. His people, they started arguing with him. Even though the proof is clear. قَالَ أَتُحَاجُّونِي فِي اللَّهِ وَقَدْ هَدَانِي. That do you argue about me with Allah when Allah is the one who guided me? I am the one calling you towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And you're arguing with me? وَلَا أَخَافُ مَا تُشْرِكُونَ بِهِ إِلَّا أَن يَشَاءَ رَبِّي شَيْئًا. I don't fear you, those that you worship. All of these idols you have standing and you worship, I don't fear them. I only fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala if He has anything planned for me. And then he goes on to say, وَكَيْفَ أَخَافُ مَا أَشْرَكْتُمْ وَلَا تَخَافُونَ أَنَّكُمْ أَشْرَكْتُمْ بِاللَّهِ مَا لَمْ يُنَزِّلْ بِهِ عَلَيْكُمْ سُلْطَانًا. How can I fear that which you worship? How can I fear that which you have just arbitrarily assigned? And you don't fear that indeed that you are associating people with Allah, associating idols with Allah, that doesn't cause you fear? So here, Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salam, he sets forth the proof for his people. He sets forth the proof of themselves, look at yourselves, sets forth the proof of look at those things around you. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says in Surah Al-Anbiya, وَتَاللَّهِ لَأَكِيدَنَّ أَصْنَامَكُمْ بَعْدَ أَن تُوَلُّوا مُدْبِرِينَ. This is that famous story that it was Eid for the people of Sayyidina Ibrahim. So then they all went to celebrate their Eid. While they're out, Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salam, he has this plan for their idols. Once they left, فَجَعَلَهُمْ جُذَاذًا. He breaks them to pieces. Judhada is not just breaking it, it is destroying it into small little pieces. إِلَّا كَبِيرًا لَهُمْ. Except for the biggest one of them. لَعَلَّهُمْ إِلَيْهِ يَرْجِعُونَ. Perhaps that they may come to return, or when they return. Again, I'm not going to go through the story. I know you guys know the story. But the point I want to make is what Sayyidina Ibrahim was doing. He was now giving them a practical example. He gave them all the examples of the intellect in thinking it through. When that didn't work, he gave them a practical example. They came back. مَنْ فَعَلَ هَذَا بِآلِهَتِنَا. Who did this with our Rabb? Who did this with our idols, with our gods? قَالُوا سَمِعْنَا فَتًى. We heard that there was this boy, يَذْكُرُهُمْ يُقَالُ لَهُ Ibrahim. He used to speak about them. He used to tell them about us. Or we used to tell us about them. And his name is Ibrahim. قَالُوا فَأْتُوا بِهِ عَلَىٰ أَعْيُنِ النَّاسِ لَعَلَّهُمْ يَشْهَدُونَ. So they went and they got him. And they brought him back. The interesting thing about Sayyidina Ibrahim's time that perhaps we don't know. Sayyidina Ibrahim's people was the first people who made their religion into a state religion. Meaning it was the religion of the government. Before, governments used to just run things, and people had their own religions that they would follow. This was a state religion. And so the state would make people follow this religion. And if you didn't follow it, then you were now committing a crime against the state. And so the king at the time came to find out what Sayyidina Ibrahim was doing and saying, and how he broke the idols. So he had him brought. And again, I'm not going to get into all of that story, but it's very similar to where we are now. There are certain things that you must believe. We think we have freedom of thought, but we don't necessarily have freedom of thought. There are certain things that you cannot say. You can't say it in public. If you do, you get into a lot of trouble. You might be kicked out of your school. You might not graduate. You might lose your job. We've seen all of this. There was a time before where I could say this, and people would look at me and be like, "What? What are you talking about? This is the land of the home and the home of the free and the brave." Not this stuff doesn't happen here. But in the past 8 months, we saw it clearly happening. We don't have the freedoms that you think we have. So in the same way, Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salam was brought before. This was the path that Allah made him take. That now he had to go in front of the king. And then the king would eventually declare that we're going to throw you into a fire. And again, we know the story. I'm not going to go through all of that again. But we see the path that Sayyidina Ibrahim was made to take. Now what happens? Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salam, he leaves Iraq, where he was. وَاذْكُرْ فِي الْكِتَابِ إِبْرَاهِيمَ. Remember in the book about Sayyidina Ibrahim, إِنَّهُ كَانَ صِدِّيقًا نَبِيًّا. He was a Siddiq and a Nabi. إِذْ قَالَ لِأَبِيهِ يَا أَبَتِي لِمَا تَعْبُدُ مَا لَا يَسْمَعُ وَلَا يُبْصِرُ وَلَا يُغْنِ عَنْكَ شَيْئًا. That, oh my father, why do you worship these things that they don't hear, they don't see, and they can't benefit you at all? يَا أَبَتِي إِنِّي قَدْ جَاءَنِي مِنَ الْعِلْمِ مَا لَمْ يَأْتِكَ. That, oh my father, some knowledge has come to me that you were not given. This is every believer. Each and every one of us has some knowledge that others don't have. What I mean is the non-Muslims don't have. This is an amana that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us. Sayyidina Ibrahim is showing us the path. That if there is some ilm, some knowledge of benefit that you have that others don't have, then you have a responsibility. فَاتَّبِعْنِي أَهْدِكَ صِرَاطًا صَوِيًّا. So, oh my father, follow me. Follow me and I will guide you to the straight path. يَا أَبَتِي لَا تَعْبُدُ الشَّيْطَانِ. If you're not following Allah, you're following shaitan. Oh my father, don't worship shaitan. إِنَّ الشَّيْطَانَ كَانَ لِلرَّحْمَنِ عَصِيًّا. That indeed, shaitan, he disobeyed the Rahman. يَا أَبَتِي إِنِّي أَخَافُ أَن يَمَسَّكَ عَذَابٌ مِّنَ الرَّحْمَنِ. Oh my father, I fear that a punishment from the merciful will come to you. It's a beautiful word, beautiful word. عَذَابٌ مِّنَ الرَّحْمَنِ. Right? I don't know how many of our parents hit us before. You don't have to raise your hands. But when your father is, disciplining you, how many of you think, oh, how merciful is my father? Oh, my mom, she's yelling at me and she's waving things at me. Oh, how merciful is my mother? It says about the adhab of Allah, the punishment of Allah. Ya abati inni akhafu an yamassaka adhabun min ar-Rahman. That, oh my father, I worry that the punishment of the All-Merciful will come to you. What does it mean? It means that the Ar-Rahman, he doesn't want to punish you. He doesn't want to do it. He wants you to have Iman. He wants you to accept Iman. He wants you to leave shirk. so that the punishment doesn't come. So the only time someone merciful is going to punish you is because you left him with no choice. You left him with no choice. And then as he says to Sayyidina Ibrahim that if you don't follow, then leave us. Sayyidina Ibrahim قال سلام عليك. May peace be on you. And he left his father. He left his people. But you see the difficulty and the hardship that he went through. How long it took him to keep trying and convincing the proofs in different ways. His own suhbah with his people. Explaining to them the path that I am on. I am a Nabi of Allah. And they're not accepting. Practical show between the stars and the moon and the sun. Another practical show. Break the idols. And even then, it's not working. Salamun alayk. At that point, he leaves his own father, he leaves his own people, and he heads out in the direction of Sham. And again, most of us know the story, so I'm not going to get into all the detail of it. But we see the path of Sayyidina Ibrahim. Sometimes the path means that you leave home. I'm not saying run away from home. Right? MashaAllah, you guys are all from Muslim households. That's not the message here. The message is that sometimes to learn this deen and to protect your iman, then you have to leave your comfort zone. You might have to travel a little bit. You might have to find the local imam or the shaykh, or maybe there is none and you have to go to the town over or the state over, or not so much today, but in the past, to other countries. If that's what you have to do, that's what you have to do. You have to protect your iman. It's the greatest thing that we have, iman, more than our life. If a person has to choose between their life and their iman, they choose their iman. Because without life, iman will still get you into Jannah. But with life and no iman, then that's not a life that's really worth living. In the end, it will be of no help for you. So what do we learn about the path of Sayyidina Ibrahim? One, it is a path of, he is the example. What is he an example of? He is an example of tawheed. He is an example of being strong on your iman to the point that you are an ummah by yourself. He is an example of tawheed in seeing it in you and around you, and then giving it to those people around you. He is one he is halim, he is merciful to those people around him. He wants them to have iman. He keeps trying and trying and trying and coming up with different ways of showing them and guiding them to become closer to deen. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions dua in Surah Al-Baqarah. رَبَّنَا وَابْعَثْ فِيهِمْ رَسُولًا مِّنْهُمْ يَتْلُو عَلَيْهِمْ آيَاتِكَ وَيُعَلِّمُهُمُ الْكِتَابَ وَالْحِكْمَةَ وَيُزَكِّيهِمْ إِنَّكَ أَنْتَ الْعَزِيزُ الْحَكِيمُ. That, O our Rabb, raise among them a messenger from them who recites your ayat upon them, who teaches them the book and the hikmah, meaning the sunnah, and he purifies them. This is the example for all of us. This is obviously speaking about Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But the example is there that when a messenger comes, you follow him. When the messenger teaches you the ayat, you learn it. And the job of the messenger is tazkiyah as well. And tazkiyah is a forgotten thing nowadays. Everyone wants to learn, which is good, we need to learn. But then people forget about tazkiyah, about purifying themselves. The Prophet ﷺ was sent as a messenger to recite ayat, to teach the book of Allah, to teach his sunnah, and to do the tazkiyah of the ummah. If we just learn the Quran, meaning as facts, just a bunch of facts, and we learn the sunnah as a bunch of facts, but we don't practice any of it, and we don't do our tazkiyah, or we start practicing upon it, and then all it does is lead us to thinking that we are better than everybody else. Oh, look at how much Quran I have memorized, this person doesn't have it. Look at how I am dressed, look how long my beard is. Look how tight my amama is. Oh, look at this person, he's not like that. If this is what your ilm does to you, then you have lost one of the most important aspects of it, which is tazkiyah, and your Islam is not proper. In fact, it will come to harm you on the Day of Judgment. So Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salam is an example of that as well, of tazkiyah. That in all of these travels and the story that he has with Sayyidina Ismail, just very briefly, about 4 times in the life of Sayyidina Ismail, Sayyidina Ibrahim came to visit him. He didn't live with him. He used to live elsewhere. And he would come to Mecca Mukarramah to visit his son. But every time he came, he did his tazkiyah. So for example, the first time he came was when he saw the dream of slaughtering his son. So he said to his son that I saw in my dream that I'm slaughtering you. So what does the son say? He says, do it. Do what Allah has shown you, what Allah has commanded you. And so this is an example for both parties, in fact, for a father and son. Later on, Sayyidina Ibrahim would come. Sayyidina Ismail, by that time, he was older and he was married. When he came to the house, he knocked on the door. Sayyidina Ismail's wife came out and she met Sayyidina Ibrahim. She didn't know who he was. Sayyidina Ibrahim asked, where is Ismail? She said, oh, he's out getting his rizq, meaning he's working. How is your condition? Oh, we're in a lot of difficulty. We don't have enough to eat. We don't have enough for this, enough for that. So Sayyidina Ibrahim says, okay, I have a message for your husband when he comes back. When he comes back, let him know that, the front of the doorstep, he needs to change that. She said, okay, that's an interesting message. Maybe he looked down, he didn't like it. Okay, khair, that's fine. Sayyidina Ibrahim leaves, Sayyidina Ismail, he comes home. He's a Nabi as well. He notices there's something different. Did somebody come? She says, yeah, there was this old man, very handsome. He came. Oh, okay, what did he say? Did he leave a message? She said, yeah, he asked some questions and he said that this front of the doorstep, make sure you change it. And so Sayyidina Ismail said, that was my father. He is telling me that I need to change my wife. What is the lesson? That your wife should be somebody who is grateful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and who does not complain about what Allah has given them. Here is a wife, she was just complaining. Sayyidina Ibrahim asked, and she just gave a long list of complaints. So this is not a woman that is befitting a Nabi of Allah. She is not going to be good for you, divorce her. So he divorces her. He marries again. Sayyidina Ibrahim comes later, knocks on the door. Okay, there's another woman. He listened to me. Alhamdulillah. Where's Ismail? Oh, he's out. Okay, how is your condition? She said, Alhamdulillah, we have everything that we need. We have meat to eat. We have water to drink. We are living in ease. So Sayyidina Ibrahim says, okay, make sure you tell your husband when he comes back that this doorstep that he has now, keep it. This is a good one. So he comes back home. Again, he notices. Did somebody come? Yeah, there was this very handsome man. Of course, the Anbiya are all very good looking. It's the nur on their face. He says, okay, what did he say? He said, make sure you keep your doorstep. So he said, this is my father. He said to keep this one. Why? Is because this is a personality that is shakira. She is one who is hamida. She is grateful and she is someone that praises Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Again, teaching the lesson to Sayyidina Ismail that the people and the company that you want around you are those people who remember Allah and praise Allah. And they are grateful to Allah. Those are the people that you want as your company because they will make you like that as well. So obviously, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give all of you wives like this. But may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make all of us people like this so we become that company for other people as well. That we are shakirun, hamidun, that we remind ourselves that no matter what difficulty we find ourselves in, there is khair upon khair that Allah has given us. And that's Allah is the one who should be praised and worshipped at all times. وَمَنْ يَرْغَبُ عَنْ مِلَّةِ إِبْرَاهِيمَ إِلَّا مَنْ سَفِهَ نَفْسَهُ. That whoever turns away from the deen of Sayyidina Ibrahim, meaning no one turns away from the deen of Sayyidina Ibrahim except for the one that has forgotten himself, or it's a nice way of saying he's missing some things up here. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala later in Surah Baqarah, He says, فَاذْكُرُونِي أَذْكُرْكُمْ وَاشْكُرُوا لِي وَلَا تَكْفُرُونَ. It's a command. It's not optional. It's not, don't do a dhikr if you feel like a Sufi. Don't do a dhikr if you are in a really bad state, only do it then. But it's a command, فَاذْكُرُونِي, remember me, meaning do my dhikr. And I will remember you. Be grateful to me all the time, in good and bad. And don't be ungrateful. يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا اسْتَعِينُوا بِالصَّبْرِ وَالصَّلَاةِ. That all believers seek help through patience and prayer. إِنَّ اللَّهَ مَعَ الصَّابِرِينَ. Indeed, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is with those who are patient. وَلَا تَقُولُوا لِمَنْ يُقْتَلُ فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ أَمْوَاتٍ. And don't say about those people who have passed in the path of Allah who were killed in the path of Allah, that they are amwat, that they are dead. بَلْ أَحْيَاءٌ وَلَكِنْ لَا تَشْعُرُونَ. But rather they are alive and you just don't perceive them. وَلَنَبْلُوَنَّكُمْ بِشَيْءٍ مِّنَ الْخَوْفِ وَالْجُوعِ وَنَقْصٍ مِّنَ الْأَمْوَالِ وَالْأَنفُسِ وَالثَّمَرَاتِ. That indeed we will try you with some fear, some hunger, some loss in wealth and in people and in monetary, in gain, in fruits. وَبَشِّرِ الصَّابِرِينَ. And so in this situation, glad tidings to those who have patience. الَّذِينَ إِذَا أَصَابَتْهُمْ مُصِيبَةٌ قَالُوا إِنَّا لِلَّهِ وَإِنَّا إِلَيْهِ رَاجِعُونَ. The people who remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, these are their characteristics. And what it means is that those who don't remember Allah, they have the opposite characteristics. What is the opposite characteristic? That when some difficulty comes to them, they don't remember. They don't have patience. They don't fall into sujood. That whenever they have some hardship, they don't remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Difficulty comes to everybody. There are times where you might not have enough food. There are times where you may not have what you wanted. You worked really hard to get something and you couldn't get it. You had something and you lost it. The person who remembers Allah, the one who has shukr for Allah, who is grateful, this is a person that when difficulty comes, they will remember Allah. But a person, when he doesn't remember Allah, then when difficulty comes, he will be the one who says, why me? Why me? Why? And so coming back to the lesson that Sayyidina Ibrahim had given his son, that you want to keep those people around you that have these traits so that you can develop these traits as well. So let's stop here, but let me just summarize the path of Sayyidina Ibrahim. The path of Sayyidina Ibrahim was one of difficulty. It was one of test and trial. It was one of rejection by his own family, his father, his people. As I mentioned, there was a point where in the entire world he was just one of 3 Muslims, the other being his wife and the other one being his nephew, who was a Nabi himself. There were difficulties that his own family had gone through. He left Hajar and Ismail in the middle of the desert. But throughout all of that, he continued this path of becoming closer and closer and guiding people closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So then how do we do that? It's not just for the days of Dhul Hijjah. It's not just, okay, Eid comes and then, okay, forget, we'll think about Sayyidina Ibrahim next year. But the focus that I want for you guys this time is, instead of just thinking about Eid and thinking about Udhiyya and Qurbani, is that we start asking a deeper question. that in these days of Dhul Hijjah, as we look at the example of Sayyidina Ibrahim, what was the path that he walked? What was the spiritual path that he took? Let me start it now. Let me begin, continue it, because these are the days, as I had mentioned in the very beginning, that the Prophet ﷺ said, فَأَكْثِرُوا فِيهِنَّ مِنَ التَّهْلِيلِ وَالتَّكْبِيرِ وَالتَّحْمِيدِ. That in these days, remember Allah a lot. Because this was the habit of Sayyidina Ibrahim. Remember Allah a lot, and you will start walking in that path of Sayyidina Ibrahim, and eventually you will get to the goal, which is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we do that together. There's no doing it alone. There's no believer that can tell himself that I am going to go live off in a jungle and I will reach Allah on my own. Most likely this person will become lost. He'll spend 20, 30 years and come back and he'll be the most lost of people. The way that we do it is we find good company. You have your close friends. MashaAllah, I know a lot of you guys are close outside, that you keep this kind of company. We set up institutions like what we're trying to do with Qadr. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward those who are working on it. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make it successful and allow it to revive this tradition that we had in our ummah before, which is this idea of futuwa, of brotherhood, of coming together, of having institutions that are there so that we can come for no other purpose but to be in the company of good people who are all trying to get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.